Welcome to the She Founds podcast and to 2025. It's that time of year when we sit down and set our goals, and many of us will have set personal finance goals. This is especially important if you're looking to bootstrap your tech startup idea. Today, I'm joined by Elisabeth Prager and Nitika Vyas, founders of Aila Money, a money personal trainer. Having both spent many years in financial services, they're going to talk us through some easy steps to help us meet our money goals. But first, a quick introduction. Elisabeth and Nitika both met at university, and they both went on to pursue careers in financial services. Elisabeth specialised in the life and pension space before moving on to private banking. She's also spent time in strategy consulting and impact investing. Nitika pursued a career in investment banking and then moved into the hedge fund space. They both realised that there is a huge disparity in financial knowledge between the wealthy and the rest of society, especially amongst women who are underserved. To solve this problem, they've launched Aila Money. Let's get into the realities of how much it costs to launch a new business. But let's lean on your story first.
So I guess, shall I start with the average cost of a business in the UK? So average numbers that we've seen for business starting in UK is setup costs of 5k and the first year costing 23k. But obviously this varies massively depending on the type of business you're going into and how you go into it. What do you need to set up? How are you going to get started? We did ours in a slow way, if I would say, and we didn't go big bang. We took some time to try and understand the problem that we were wanting to solve. Women's finance is a big space. What do we want to do? How do we want to have an impact? So we first started by doing questionnaires for people and actually finding out which part of the problem was the biggest part. What was stopping women? What was the part that people would find most useful? And we saw that it was the fact that there wasn't personalized education. So that there was a lot of education about finances, but it didn't feel relevant to a person. And the fact that there is an intention action gap. People know that they need to look at their finances, but they don't have the time to give it or don't prioritize it. And so needed help putting that in place. So we then went no code and have done things in a way where we learned a lot and have kept it quite scrappy and done as much as we can ourselves. So that looked like both of us learning skills such as how to use Figma so we can make our own prototype rather than paying someone else to do a prototype. Before then sending that to a tech company to try and get the prices, we were actually told what we had made was a 5-year roadmap. So we're like, whoops. And it was going to cost a lot of money. We then took that step back to then say, let's go test whether people will want to use this first before we spend a lot of money into
and so
it.
At this stage, you were both in full-time employment, right? Yeah. And so everything you were doing would be outside of work. I think like stamina to work is also quite important in the early stages. You mentioned you learned Figma and you sent out a survey. How much time does that realistically take outside of work?
Always more than you plan for, I think is the answer. I think both of us, and I can speak very much for myself, but I think Nitika's story is probably not too far from it. This was a journey to entrepreneurialism, right? To entrepreneurship. We didn't wake up one morning having never thought of it and we're like, and today we're just gonna, off we go. So I think we both financially put in place certain mechanisms, if you want, some of which was savings, some of which was passive income. So actually getting income from either rental income or from investment income to make sure that we had some cash flow that was coming in. And then actually, setting aside savings over multiple years, right? We both started our journey 15 years-ish into our careers. So we built a bit of that buffer. And I think then it was this, okay, as Nitika was saying, we started testing on the side whether what was, I think, a bit of our passion and our passion project could actually start to become something real. It was when people started to actually, when we had a no-code solution in the market, and we started getting feedback, but not just feedback, but decent feedback. And wow, this is really helping me. And then started saying, okay, would anyone actually pay for this? That was one sort of big milestone. And then I think also another big milestone was we started to get interest from accelerator and incubator programs to say, hey, you're clearly doing something and something's working. So then I think that's another sort of, I guess, thumbs up to get to go, okay, right, we're not just smoking something here. This is not, I don't know, Puff the Magic Dragon or whatever. There's something real here. And as we had those validation points, it meant that you are not de-risking, but perhaps you're mentally de-risking in some way, right?
Yeah.
So it's been an evolution as we've gone that way.
That's also our journey and what we were comfortable with. We wanted to get some validation along the way. And don't get me wrong, I quit my job before we had our first revenue coming in from our no code. So I was taking a gamble on it, but with conviction. I think, like Liz said, we had run our own numbers, both individually and then come and discussed with each other as to what was feasible. How long could I give this a go? And I have a date, which I'm happy to share. I have until December this year. I need to see where this is going before I have to think about whether I need another source of income. We had done our timelines to say, this is how long we can give this a real go.
Yeah.
We also had that conversation before we before we left the world of work and handed in our resignations to be like, okay, what does this look like? Are we stable enough with our finances to, one, cover our own costs for this period and also the potential costs of the business? For us, which is a financial app, we had good estimates of how much building this app would cost. And again, they were rough. They were never going to be full. There was an optimistic part of us that thought I could build it all in no code. And I did try to start with, and got very frustrated that I wasn't getting quite where I needed to be. And then actually speaking to other companies and consulting places that could do it for us, they're like, what you're trying to do, you can't do in no code. And then we took these learnings, but we had a rough idea of, if we got someone to do it all to the level we want, that 5-year roadmap, this is how much it's going to cost. Now, we were both very comfortable saying, we're probably not wanting to put all of that in now, but at least we had an idea of what the top band was.
Yeah, and I think the other angle is we constantly check in, whether when our tech team now comes to us and says, hey, timelines are going to mean X, and we start to go, oh, we want it faster, that might mean a new resource. There is not just a conversation about timelines and priorities. There's then a conversation between the two of us of, are we okay paying for that extra whatever, right? That's number one. And the second thing is, we haven't talked at all about the fact that we have bootstrapped this, and we've very consciously made a choice to bootstrap to this point. Many people have suggested or proposed that we actually but we could have started fundraising earlier with just an idea and the MVP, the really no code solution. But we, again, sat down, had that chat and said, actually, you know what? We have this capacity, we have this bandwidth, we've created this, we have conviction, and therefore we are going to try and keep the equity ourselves, right? We are going to try and hold on and see where this goes and raise funds then when we want to and need to, but in a stronger position from a business perspective.
Yeah. And I guess let's come back to some of the terminology of some of the stuff we've done. Liz has mentioned that we have passive sources of income. So for us, it was our business plan, projected plans of cost of a business, which I think you should always do before you get into a business. It may not be right, but always go with the highest worst case scenario. Then looking at ourselves, something we teach on the Aila app is having an emergency fund and like covering your expenses. For us, I know I wanted to make sure I had enough to cover my expenses for 18 months. We don't say that for everyone, but if you're starting a business, having an emergency fund covering your expenses for as long as you think you're going to need this, and then maybe a bit more, is really important, because it gives you that mindset of, I am covered. I know I can cover a level of expenses for this. And knowing that you've got maybe, whether it's passive income or other money set aside that isn't just your emergency fund for you to live, because that emergency fund is just your expenses. And as much as I'd love to say Isla is everything, I still have family. I still have to get presents. Say Christmas is just gone for Christmas, or family holidays, or things you still want to do outside of your business. Your business is just one part of your world.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting to hear that you said for you it was 18 months and that it just varies depending on people's appetite for risk.
Yeah, so a normal emergency fund is usually 3 to 6 months for an average person. I have extended that out for me because that's what I'm comfortable with in terms of making sure I can cover myself whilst I don't have a full income.
Yeah.
And let me give you the other perspective. So I have 2 kids and a partner. So I, in some ways, have the higher expenses, but also potentially also the luxury of a bit of a security net, because obviously I have had to have the conversations with my partner to go, if I step away from a full-time job and do this, then it has an impact on how this family is going to run, right? Because that's the reality of it. So how much time would we as a unit be able to cover this? Or what sort of things do we need to worry about or talk about or readjust? So another sort of interesting dynamic or different dynamic that plays in there for founders with partners or families.
Yes. And have there been any like huge unexpected costs that have come up that you perhaps didn't imagine you encountering to begin with, yourselves encountering with it? Or has it been pretty you would expected?
So I'm going to say no huge ones,
Mm.
and not and maybe touch wood, right? Because we've been lucky that we've either planned well or we've projected, or maybe we've not had any incidents where something's happened. What I will say is your wish list versus reality is always something that needs to be checked. Right. So give you an example, we're looking at a launch party later this month. And obviously we'd love to have it in some of the most amazing, cool, nice places. But you look at it and you're like, you want me to pay what for this venue? Excuse me? That's insane. And so you then have to go, okay, right, but what is it that I'm actually, what's the core of this? What's the core that I'm trying to achieve? For us, it is creating a space where women can talk about their finances and be inspired and take action about their finances. Does it therefore need to be in like the most fancy location? Maybe not. So it's about going back and sense checking some of your actions and going, really, is this what we need right now? Or is this a nice to have that we could actually get around in another way?
And I think one place where Liz and I are very similar on, which is why I giggled, is I would use the word stingy, but money savvy is the other word for it. And we will both try and see what we can do ourselves rather than outsource. It takes a lot for us to outsource. Like I said, even before we got a tech team to help us with our build, we were both adamant I could build it myself. Having never built an app myself, we were both of the mindset, yep, Nitika can do this.
She's awesome that way, you know?
There is that balance, because actually, did we probably lose 2 months of making sure we found the right tech team because we were adamant we could do it in-house ourselves? Yes. But if it had worked, we'd have saved money. And actually, that was the only time where we have probably that's not worked for us. Every other time we have done things ourselves and it's worked.
How much did you spend, if you don't mind sharing, in that very pre-build stage when you're testing out? Because it seems there's 2 costs really. There's actually what you're putting into the business, but then the real costs there is actually maintaining yourself while you're working on that.
Yeah, I think those costs were pretty low, largely subscriptions for things like, I don't know, Canva, Microsoft, Typeform, Figma, etc. There's a base layer, but it was maybe several £100 a month. Sorry, we'd have to go back and actually check how much exactly it was, but it was not huge costs. There is obviously the maintaining yourself. There's the sweat equity, which you could calculate, right? The sort of opportunity cost foregone.
It was more labor than it was subscription costs. So it was just a lot of time, with, especially if you're doing it no code. No code means effectively, unfortunately, a lot more manual.
Yeah. And so I imagine that for those of people who can't afford to quit their job straight away, this is stuff that they'll have to be putting this time in after work to get to a point where they can actually start building.
The dark rings come not from my two children. No. They come from the two kids and Aila, the third kid.
And just to give everyone a reality check, whether people who are considering to get into this, what time were you working until on average?
There have been times where I've done the day job and then continued working till 2-3 in the morning, because you just do. And I've done all-nighters, as has Liz.
Yeah.
We are just, there is just no end. And I think one of my biggest learning is you can't get it all done, and almost learning to be okay with that. It's not something that I necessarily am comfortable with as much. So neither with Liz. So we're both like, we need to get everything done, and it's just impossible.
Yeah, and at the same time, I think what keeps you going, it's been a really interesting realization for me. What keeps you going is that unlike most day jobs, you can often see, if I put in that extra hour, those extra 2 hours, those extra 3 hours, I can see it translate into something that's real, that's either part of a Figma screen journey, right? So part of the actual app, or a marketing thing that we're doing that so and so many people are going to read or post about or repost about or whatever. It doesn't matter. So you can feel it, you can see it. It's unlike most things that you do in a corporate job where you spend lots of time not seeing the results.
Let's talk about the build. Every app is going to cost at different amounts depending on what needs to be built. Realistically, what would be like the minimum you're looking for an app?
So I would just say there are so many great low code, no code solutions out there which help you build apps. So firstly, anyone who's thinking about it, please look at those first. It didn't work for us in our specifications, doesn't mean it won't work for you. These apps are getting more and more sophisticated month by month with what they allow you to be able to do. If you are able to do that, then again, there's just more sweat equity and time it takes you. But then if you are looking for a team, there are lots of different types of teams you can get. You can get teams which come in price what you're doing, and then work alongside you to just build the minimum no code version. So just to get you up and running with a proof of concept. You've got agencies who will work with you and actually take some capital and be a partner as such. Or you can go to a tech firm who you either consult and have them come and build your full solution, or you bring it in-house. So there is a number of different levels you can go through, all with different pricing scales. We looked at all of them, and we decided that we wanted a team that could effectively eventually be in-house. So we started with them in a consulting framework, but with a view that we want this to succeed, and we see this as a longer thing rather than just a proof of concept. So we have a team that are effectively our team now and are working for us. And that probably comes with a higher cost than some of the other options. And we're paying around 5K a month for that.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, because it gives people some kind of clarity on what to expect.
That is different because that can change because of the timeframes. We have multiple people working on our solution. You can have it as one person working on it. You can get an intern. We didn't want someone who was learning on the job. We needed people who could
hit the ground running. Yeah.
There will be different ways you can do this. You might be more tech savvy than us and can do some of it yourself, or at least have a junior who's just come out of university who you can pay to do this with better oversight than we could. It really just depends.
Yeah, so lots. Now let's get into how people can go into the year and start saving.
Yeah,
so that people can make this dream come true. So why don't you talk us through like some of the options for saving, and maybe we can just talk about maybe like a typical person that's working a 9-to-5 professional job they know that they have this ambition to start a company in the future? What's one of the first steps that they can do to save?
I think the first place to start is knowing why you're going to do something. So if it's that you're putting aside money for that emergency fund or for that starter capital, etc., knowing that and always reminding yourself of that's why I'm doing this is a really good place to start. The second thing then is to actually look at what you take in, as in what is your, especially if you're a salaried employee, what you take in and then how much you spend. And if there's money left over, then consider how you put that aside, how you automate that putting aside, how much of that you put into your emergency fund versus your starter capital pot, etc. Right? So those are the two things. So look at your why, think about what you've got left over at the end of the month, and then start automating those savings or investments, because that then makes the behavior a lot less resistant. Nitika, you want to add something to this?
I'd add to that, it's not just look at what you've got left at the end of the month, it's look at your now.
Yeah.
A lot of we break things down into your need expenses, which is the stuff that you need to be spending money on every month. That is either your rent, your mortgage, your phone bill, your food bills, like they are your necessity. Then you have want expenses each month. And so it's not just looking as to what you have left over. These want expenditure is the things that you could almost maybe trim a little bit off from now. And then you have your future, which is either you're saving or you're investing. And there is a general rule of 50, 30, 20. So 50% of your your income that you're taking home should be in your need expenditure, 30% in your wants, and 20% investing in future you, whether that's in your saving or your investing. Look through where you currently are. Are you in line with this? Can you trim your want expenditure now? Because remember, if you've positioned it in your why, what you want for your future, are you willing to sacrifice some of your wants now to get you to the future you want? That 20% investing or saving in the future is just a guideline. If you can do more than that's great, especially if you've got a goal such as starting a business. The more you can put in that, the more you're working towards that future as quickly as possible.
Can you give us some examples of some of the wants and things that people could think about trimming away?
Yes. So mine, we laugh about this. I got into a very financial services mindset that if I worked late, I got Ubers home, paid for by the company. But what that made me do is normalize getting Ubers. So if ever I'm late, Uber is the first thing I will think about. That has been a want expenditure for me that probably has taken up a lot of my time. For other people, and like what we've shown people on the Aila journey is subscriptions. People need to take that moment to sit there and look at your subscriptions. It's very easy to have multiple subscriptions without realizing what you're paying for. And actually, we've done this with a lot of people on the Aila journey. And one person managed to save £400 a month.
Wow.
And it was as part of a couple. They really took some time to look through their subscriptions as a unit and was like, oh,
there's quite a lot here.
And they were both paying for the same things by accident when they could have had a joint account. Spotify, for being an example, they challenged whether they needed both Netflix, Now TV, Disney, as well as Amazon, and they have managed to reduce things such as that. So these are some examples.
I think everybody, I think everybody's got their own sort of wants, right? And there's no one definition. For some people, it's that they want to go have a weekend away every quarter. If that's something that you might want to consider, only having 3 weekends away, because actually that might be a couple of hundreds or thousands of pounds that you could actually put into the future. That's a want. For some people, it might be coffee is a want. For other, coffee is a need, delivery, etc. There's so many different things and there's so many permutations for every individual that it's really important to just understand your own track and understand your own expense habits, if you want. And based on that, then go, okay, great. What can I perhaps shift? Same if you have kids. Do your kids need to go to 3 after school activities? Or could maybe you get a grandparent to look after them on one day? Because maybe that's a way to think about things in a different way as well.
Yeah. And I think the main thing to highlight is when people are looking at this, we're not saying strip out everything. It's just work out what you're okay almost dialing down. So it's not like never eat out.
Yeah.
It's which budget are you comfortable with? Because actually, if you try and strip everything out of that one expenditure, you're not going to be happy and you're not going to stick to it.
Yeah, it's like an extreme diet in one sense, isn't it?
It doesn't help. It doesn't get you anywhere.
This is why we say with a personal trainer for your finances, because there is actually so much of a linkage when it comes to your finances to whether it's dieting or your fitness. And the key is consistency in all of them.
And should they be doing something in order to make sure they don't dip back into that saving pot? Because sometimes it can be, these saving pots can be easily accessible. Is there like a specific type of savings pot they should be looking at, or savings pool?
Oh, so there are financial mechanisms that allow you to, I'll call it quote unquote, lock your money up for a certain period of time. So there's almost a penalty whereby you get a higher interest rate for the time that you're in the product, but it costs you if you're trying to access it earlier. So that is a good mechanism for people who feel like they need to dip in. They're called fixed deposits. Most major banks will offer them. I think the other way of thinking about it is actually, and this is going to maybe sound a bit archaic, but build other speed bumps. So maybe you put your savings account into a different bank and you just don't have that banking app on your mobile phone. And you don't have a credit card or a card attached to that savings account, right? So you have built, it's still accessible through your laptop, but it means you actually have to sit down, create the time, go into your laptop, transfer that money. It's not like, I can just quickly do it through payment or whatever. I can't just quickly dip in and get out of it. It means it's still accessible, but it's slightly less accessible because you've built your own speed bumps if you want, right? And there's many other ways of doing this. You could even say to a partner, perhaps, I'm going to put this in here and I have to come and ask you, quote unquote, if it's a good friend or something, not for permission, but I want to now dip into it. Can we have a conversation about it beforehand? There's loads of different ways of doing this.
And I think one thing to also highlight is Liz has mentioned fixed term deposits. People have different risk tolerance.
Yes.
We want people to be earning as much as they can on this future money.
Yes.
So one, if you're looking at putting it into savings, make sure it's in a high interest rate account. So not only put that money away, but make sure that money works for you. And the other thing is look at investing.
Yes.
What can you invest it, which typically will give you higher returns on that. But that is all based on someone's want and ability to take that risk.
Mm-hmm. You've also mentioned earlier about automating, putting money away. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Of course. Do you want to do that, or shall I?
So we think automating is so important. I don't know why people feel like if something is hard, then it is better for you. That is not the case when it comes to finances. You should make your finances and the financial admin as easy as possible. You do not score any points for making your life harder on yourself when it comes to your finances. So where possible, automate. And actually what that looks like in terms of practical tips is if you have a salaried job, you know what date you're getting money in. So then you can set up all your bills and your credit card payments to come out as soon as that money comes in. So you know what you're playing with, but also pay yourself. That 20% I was saying for your future you, or whatever percentage you work out you can do, automatically put that away. Have it so there is a standing order, so it always goes into another account, so you don't even see it. So that all that you're left with in your current account is the money you have agreed is your want expenditure for the month. Your banks will let you do this instantly online. It's about finding a way. If you're looking at what you're doing with that future money, you can put into an ISA, which is a tax-free savings account, whether that's an investment one or a cash one. You can have it automated so the money goes out every month straight away. And these are the things that I think are really important to do. People I'm the sort of person that automates my credit card bills, so that goes out. So I know I've paid it off in full, because you are charged interest on the amount, even if you're on the full amount, even if you've paid off partial amounts. So I want to make sure that's just done. Other people want to check it, but it means that you're more likely to accidentally forget, or something happens and you can't do it on time. I would say also a big tip of one thing that can't be automated, but maybe you get automated in your head, is having a review cycle, of whether it's on a monthly basis or a 3 month, and it's automated in your diary to do financial admin. You set it for maybe 2 hours every month, and that is an automated calendar entry with yourself, is another one I would highly suggest people do.
There's another one that I'd love to add, which is rounding. These are now, and again, multiple apps out there help you, multiple banks out there help you do this. Let's say you go into a coffee shop and your latte costs you, I don't know, £3.85 or £4.65. That difference between the 385 and 4 is automatically, so those 15p are automatically rounded up, and off you go into a savings account. Same if it was 465, then the difference between the £5 would go in there. And if you think about that, every single time you spend a bit of money, typically it's not 1, 2, 10, 20. There is just an increment on that. So if every time, 3 times a day, you're putting away £1.50-ish, right? Every time, that does multiply throughout the year, right? That does make a big difference in a way that actually you wouldn't notice if you weren't rounding up. So again, something that can be automated very quickly. I love what Nitika says around the automate and don't make the admin as little as possible. One place, though, you shouldn't do that is if you have got a tendency to overspend, right? Or to dip into your savings, as we were talking. So almost the behaviors you don't want to continue, right? So if there's behaviors where you're like, it's been made too easy to spend or to dip into savings or to whatever, use a credit card, then those are moments in your life where you want to de-automate, right? So you want to remove your credit card details from your online shopping basket. You want to, as I said with the savings account, make sure you don't have the access on your mobile phone. You want to leave it in your basket if you're online shopping and maybe step away for 24 hours and come back to it, etc. These are the sorts of things that do really benefit from de-automation, because they're the behaviors you don't want to support, whereas the ones that you absolutely do want to support, which we've talked about, are the ones where you automate the hell out of them if you can.
Yeah, there's nothing more heartbreaking than seeing money like go into your savings account and then go back out.
Yes.
Like, later in the month.
But another question you want to ask yourself in that moment is, what's led me to need to do that? Right? So often it's that reflection barely happens. What happens is we jump that reflection and go straight to, oh, that feels a bit rubbish, or I feel really guilty, or actually I'm a bit ashamed, when there's probably, or there's potentially a good reason, which might be that we were talking about it. You went on the extreme diet, and actually you went and tried to save more than what you need for your rent and what you need for your groceries and what you need for your, so you've gone into complete austerity, and there's no way that you're going to be able to do that over a long period of time, and you shouldn't, right? So you then need to go back and sort of go, okay, right, let me set these realistic goals. Let me set goals that are achievable and where I do reward myself, and where it's, yeah, you don't have to go from 0 to hero, or like 0 to complete, austerity.
Is there anything else that we could be thinking about in terms of achieving our goals?
So as we go into the new year, everyone thinks about New Year's resolutions. What are your financial New Year's resolutions? And it may be to start a business. Break that goal down. Work out how you make that goal manageable and break it down into smaller chunks. Liz knows I'm slightly obsessed with this book, which is the 12-week year, which is a great book showing you how you can break goals down and make it more achievable. A year seems like a long time. Break down all of your goals into what in corporate world you call smart objectives, but make them smaller, make them for 3 months. So that way you can check in regularly, discuss it with people. So you have a support network who are keeping you accountable for this, and be kind to yourself as well. If you've got these financial goals, if things don't work out one week, that's okay, but just try and stay consistent with them would be my advice on this.
I just want to really pick up on that point of accountability. Simply by telling somebody that you have a savings goal, you are more than double as likely to achieve it. Simply by telling somebody that you are trying to achieve X, whatever X is, right? So putting £2,800 away to be my emergency fund, starting to save up £5,000 as starter capital for my business over the next 3 years. Simply by having this conversation and saying to you, I'm trying to do this, the commitment is way more real than putting it on a piece of paper, right? So as part of what we're doing with Aila is we're actually building in accountability circles where it's a super friendly environment, safe space. It is not like a leaderboard and how are you getting on? None of that. It is there to help people articulate what their goals are and then hold each other to account. And yes, celebrate the wins. And of course, also say, hey, I'm not on track. How should I be getting back on track? But we're starting these virtually monthly and in person as well monthly. And the idea is then longer time to also build them into the app. If accountability is something that they want to try for their money goals for 2025.
Interesting. Something just came to mind. Do you think sometimes your circle can influence how much you spend? Because they have this theory of you are who your 5 friends are. And I think that certain groups of people just spend more than others. Do you have any tips around that?
I do. I heard that saying that the 5 people you're most with influence you as a person and build you as a person. I think in my first couple of years of working, and it resonated with me so much. And I do think it is so true. Now, that doesn't mean you look at your friends and find all of their flaws and go, oh, don't like that. I'm not going to hang out with you. But there is different people, different energies. And if you're working towards the same priorities, they are more likely to understand and support you than someone who is maybe not working on that. The best example, again, comes back to food. If you're on a diet and you're hanging around with someone who's genuinely trying to put on weight, it doesn't work. Like each of you are constantly going to be triggering each other of either not eating enough or eating too much. And so it is about making sure you find a tribe of people who have a similar goal. They don't have to be the same goal, but they are motivated in this same part of life and can support you.
I would take it almost a step further, if I may, as well, right? Sometimes it's less about what you're spending, but it's the lifestyle. And this is where the good old keeping up with the Joneses sort of comes in, right? So if I am surrounded by people who value me for the bags I have, the nails I have, the shoes I wear, the car I drive, the house I live in, and whatever the fancy meals I go to, and that's what we do together, then of course it's hard to break out of that because that's what that circle is asking of you, right? And there is a minimum spend that is associated with that. So I do think that there is a lifestyle facet to this. And the recommendation is not to ditch your friends and off you go, but it is about going, do the behaviors serve me, right? Because the other thing for me that's very interesting is often money is a really difficult subject to talk to people about, yet it permeates everything that we do. We know if somebody has a Chanel handbag that they have spent money on this. Whatever that symbol is, and we have these symbols, we know this. But we could change the conversation, and you see it we're starting to see this amongst some of the women in our community where they're like, yeah, I have those 2 or 3 friends that actually we do talk finances and we do talk saving goals and we do talk investments and we do hold each other to account. And I get that phone call to tell me that I need to, whatever, update my pension and think about this, etc. And that's amazing. It's not all of the friends, but there are two or it's small groups that find each other and that then are there to hold each other to account. And that's the important thing to find.
And that's exactly what we're trying to do with these accountability circles, because there is a lot that you can do on the app, but sometimes you just want your tribe. You want people who are cheerleading you on. And whilst we don't have that in that app, we're going to do that virtually and in person in London.
No, I think for us, the only thing is if we're able to sort of do a download now at the end, that's the most important.
We are in a cost of living crisis at the moment, and I feel that a lot of people will be feeling they're just getting by, like they've just got enough money to pay their rent and for food. Even for some people that will be hard, and starting a business for them is the idea is that they will have more financial security in the future or be able to earn more. Do you have any advice for people on that end, perhaps, on what they could do when they're just meeting the bare minimum?
Ooh, that's a great question, Pavisha. And we totally appreciate, because of the cost of living crisis, that so many people with such great ideas may be struggling to see how they put that into action. And it is so frustrating to see that that is the case, because a lot of people are struggling. And I think we have a few things that we could say that could help them. So first, start small. Even with us, as we mentioned, the main thing that we initially put in was sweat capital. It's our time.
Yeah.
So work out what you can do without putting too much costs in. That is unfortunately sometimes giving up your weekends, your evenings, to try and see how you can make an idea work. There are ways of getting a side gig that helps you maybe bolster your current income to help you get the funds together you need for your idea. But then it's also, like we've just been saying about a community, it's working out where else you can tap into. Say, if you've got a great idea, who you can speak to about it, who might be able to help you with the funds. There are different ways of maybe getting funding for an idea you have. I'll let Liz talk through some of the ways that you might be able to do that.
Yeah, I think you've really tapped into something. There's obviously communities that support. I know and loads of charities as well, but there's also grant funding. And that essentially is money either from a foundation, so a charity, or from a company, or even from the government to support really good ideas. There's some great websites and resources in the UK and elsewhere, actually, Europe-wide, for these. It just takes a bit of time to research and then to apply for the grant. Sometimes these grants are actually sustaining your cost of living as well as, right? So you really have to look at what's available. There is no need to follow the path that we took, which is to bootstrap, right? So there are many companies that purely with an idea and a pitch deck go and seek investment, which essentially means that they are getting external funds much earlier in the process than we are. That can typically equity funding through angels. So through angel investors, it could be through family and friends. So you don't even have to go to formal institutions. You can ask closer family and friends to help in the first instance. And then if you're on to like the multi-million/billion-dollar idea, there's obviously venture capital, but they really do look for scale, etc. So that that takes a certain type of business and business idea to really go there.
Sorry, and if I may add as well, yeah. So we've shown the grants, the funding, where you can get different areas of getting them. And Liz mentioned things such as pitch decks, which allow people to get funding. The other thing I'd highlight, and we have really benefited from, is incubator and accelerator programs. So there are so many out there, and they tap into a wide range of different areas. They can help you get the skills you need to get the confidence to start your own business. So there is so much that we didn't know that we needed to think about. Like the words low code, no code meant nothing to us. Product market fit, target audience. These were all just words that didn't mean anything. And there are so many programs out there to support, whether it's females, underrepresented backgrounds, tech. There are incubators and accelerator programs which are free to apply to, which are then able to help support you. Mm-hmm. Some of the ones, even if you are selected, you get capital for the business as soon as you're selected. So it's finding the right one for you that is able to help and support you along the way. And they don't require the commitment of you having given up your full-time job to allow you to get there. And they then also unlock networks of people who might be able to fund you. As Liz said, angel networks or friends and family, there are ways of them getting a tax efficient investment in you, because the UK has schemes called the SEIS and EIS, where people investing in other people's businesses get a great tax saving by doing so.
Fantastic. Do you have any closing words that you would like to share?
I think the most important one is we went live. We actually have a product in the market. It's available on the Apple and Android app stores. So head over there and download Aila Money, Your Money PT. And obviously try it. Tell us what you think. We're all about gathering the feedback and the insights from our early adopters in order to make the product not just amazing, but like genuinely kick ass. Please give it a go and join the accountability circles, which I hope Bavisha will also be sharing in the links when we send out the podcast.
Lovely. Thank you both so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast episode today, please do hit the subscribe button and share this episode with like-minded connections. I'd also like to take this opportunity to let you know that I'm sharing knowledge on how to build tech products. If this sounds like something that's going to be helpful to you, please subscribe to the She Founds newsletter. The link will be in the show notes.